doesn't like to steal ideas? And there's been plenty of good ideas to steal today. And we might as well steal them from someone who's been there, done that, and has recipes for successful comms channel adoption, which is a great topic for anybody in the digital age of communication. And that's the name of this next session with presenter Libby Hardy, Director of Internal Communication at Aldi, Inc. Libby is an Aldi veteran with 17 years in a variety of roles throughout the business. Store manager, check. District manager, check. National buying director, IT transformation lead, check. So lots of experience to draw on. And today, Libby is the Director of Internal Comms for Aldi, as I said, a function she built from the ground up during the pandemic. I'll let Libby tell you a little bit more, and she'll be joined by a fantastic moderator, Jeff Corbin. Please welcome them both to the stage.
Libby! Where's my friends from GE? Thank you. All right.
Awesome.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming upstairs. So I'm going to follow in the footsteps of my colleague Esau. We're not going to do a fun fact as our icebreaker. Rather, let's talk about karaoke.
Yeah. Let's talk about karaoke.
Tell me about your favorite karaoke song, Libby.
Out of all the conversations we've ever had, we've never talked about karaoke.
I understand.
And I love karaoke so much that I actually have a playlist on my Spotify app where I save my karaoke songs, because when I go to karaoke, I always forget what my favorites are, so now I have quick reference in my Spotify app.
All right, well, so after the session, you can ask Libby to share her Spotify karaoke list with you. Okay, so I've only done karaoke once in my life. It was when I started at Staff Base. I don't know why Staff Base is into karaoke so much, but in any event, my song was Rhinestone Cowboy. Not by Glenn Campbell, but by Bruce Springsteen. If you haven't heard that version, okay. Let's talk been there, done that, internal communication strategy. So I think one of the things that we really want to get into today is a little bit, in this session, is a little bit more the tactical, like what you should be thinking about, what works, what doesn't work. I'm going to let Libby talk a little bit about Aldi and her organization, her background, and we can get into what has been working for Aldi and what hasn't, and get into some of the specifics of Staff Base, your use of it. So maybe just tell a little bit about your background. 17 years is a long time at one company. How'd you get into internal communications? Maybe tell us a little bit about Aldi, the nature of the workforce, the organization.
Yeah, sounds good. So as you heard, I've been with Aldi for 17 years. I did start in stores, so as a store manager. Was a district manager then for about 4 years, so just had a lot of really good store experience. I love the store teams. I loved our employees at Aldi. So that was just a really, really great part of my career. And then I was given the opportunity to transition to the buying department. And during that time, those 7 years, I was a buying director, worked with many of our suppliers, developing products, developing packaging labels. There's just all kinds of stuff that goes into getting the product from supplier to shelf at Aldi. And then about 3 years ago, I was asked to join the global IT transformation project. I was on that for a short time. Everything is always right, pre-COVID, post-COVID. COVID hit. And then, obviously that global project was still happening. There were all kinds of things happening in the business. Our leaders realized how important it was to be able to directly reach our store and warehouse employees. So I think there was this immediate shift in focus on communicating with our employees, right? So not only the really important critical stuff, but just to keep people motivated, moving along, and navigating through the massive pivot that we all went through in 2020. So from there, I love this moment in my career. It's one of my favorite moments. I got the classic, MS Teams ping from my boss. hey, do you got a couple minutes? It was like a random Thursday morning. I'm like, oh boy, what's going on now? And so we jumped on a quick call, and she was talking me through an opportunity we identified that we wanted to move internal comms from our HR department. So internal comms at the time was a really new function at Aldi, a new team that we started in the HR department.
Wait, what year was this?
Oh, let's see, that would have been 2019.
Okay.
Yeah, so really, really new. Through those first few crisis months of the pandemic, the internal comms team came over and really sat next to our external comms team in the customer interaction department at Aldi. So that department is made up of our marketing teams, our communication teams, customer service, and e-commerce. So it made a lot of sense because a lot of what we were needing to communicate externally to customers also needed to be communicated internally to our employees. And so our leadership recognized that there were a lot of efficiencies to be gained, and it was just the right move to make for the future of that department. So long story short, they made that transition to bring internal comms over to what we call CI, and I was asked to lead the internal comms team, and I emphatically said yes, yes, yes. I felt like, even though it was a lateral move, I tell everybody this, I felt like it was a promotion. I was just super, super excited about the opportunity.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So just for everyone's knowledge, Aldi is a quite large supermarket chain as well as food distribution network, I guess you would say. Can you just talk about the nature of your employees? Obviously a lot of frontline warehouse type employees. How many people in the company?
Yeah, I think we're right about 48,000 in the US right now. So obviously we're part of the Aldi South Group, which is a global entity. Some of my Australian colleagues are here today, so happy to have them join us. But yeah, our US business, we're over 2,500 stores now. I think we're in 38 stores now off the top of my head. And yeah, almost 50,000 employees, which a majority of those employees are your frontline workers, if you will, so in the stores and the distribution centers.
And I would imagine, like many in this economical environment, employee retention is a bit of a challenge, particularly in the stores?
Definitely. I think we're had a lot of conversations over the last couple of days with folks that I've met here, and I think we're all facing similar challenges when it comes to turnover, retention. Yeah, definitely a challenge for us.
Yeah, so one of the things that we're doing a lot of thinking about at Staffbase is how can we demonstrate the correlation between communications, transparent communications, ease of access to information, and is there an impact on employee retention? Because clearly a lot of us are facing this problem. So it's something that we're going to certainly keep an eye on. One of the things that you and I have spent a lot of time talking about, in fact, it was the first time I met you in person. It was actually my first business trip at Staffbase. I think it was before business travel really opened up, but Libby invited me to Batavia, Illinois, to do one of our strategies for success workshops and to really help them think through how to put Staffbase to its best use and for you to be successful. So thinking about user segmentation, your content strategy, how to launch Staffbase to an organization of the size of an Aldi. So obviously a lot to think about, and that was the starting point for our conversations. But one of the things that you made very clear from the outset to the handful of people that were in the room at the time was the importance that leadership has placed on communications, and the fact that there really were no holes barred when it came to communications. So I know a lot of folks I've spoken to here, that's not necessarily the case. Leadership necessarily isn't as involved or committed to communications. Any tips, any thoughts on, what folks here can do to get leadership to buy in? What did you do?
Yeah, and I think it's fair to acknowledge that I've been in situations within Aldi where I didn't have leadership buy-in, right? So I've experienced that. I know it's challenging when you're trying to achieve an objective or build a team and you just don't have that buy-in. But fortunately or unfortunately, COVID helped with that, right? Because there was just this inherent understanding and desire to communicate directly with employees, and we knew that it was a massive gap for us in our organization. So that was there, but okay, what do you do with that information? How are we gonna build up this app? We understand we need the technology, but then what's our strategy? So my amazing team and I worked on an internal comm strategy for our US business that really has become the foundation of everything that we do. So once we wrapped up, got that strategy finalized, I then presented it to the senior leadership team and got their buy-in on the strategy, and then said, okay, great, if you want me to accomplish this, then here's what I need from you. We need this resource. And we built out the team structure. So we've just had tremendous success, I think, by, again, getting buy-in on the strategy and getting that, and bringing the right folks along in the conversation and the journey. So, partnering with our operations teams and saying, guys, what are the problems or what are the challenges that we can help you solve with communications? So I think that, one, having a robust strategy, thoughtful strategy, two, bringing your key business partners along on that journey, and then three, taking that to leadership. It's almost like, a collective effort that makes it harder to say no. So.
Yeah, so can you talk a little bit more specifically about, we all think about strategy. You talked about your operational business units, getting them involved. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what that meant, what it looked like?
We are on a mission to deliver the right message to the right people at the right time, like many of you in this room. And the way that we approach that is we broke it into 4 quadrants. So we've got our content and messaging team that is responsible for what we say and how we say it. And then I've got my channels and measurement team, which is obviously responsible for the channels that we're working on and how do we measure success. And something as simple as that and putting that on paper has been such a tremendous help as far as not only building out the structure of my team, but then ways of working across the business teams, the other business units in all the US landscape.
So when you think about the different business units, which units are you dealing with specifically?
The business units? Really the entire network. So we have, again, a national operations committee that oversees, it's kind of like they're the store representatives, the store liaisons. We've got the same for our distribution centers. We even have the same committee structure that represents our regional office teams. And then we've got our national services department. So that's the teams like corporate responsibility, human resources, training and development, IT teams. So essentially the way that we've structured the team with the resource, we've been able to just develop ways of working within each of those teams. So we do a couple things. One, we have a really tactical briefing process. So we heard this morning a lot about saying no, or that, as comms professionals, we're constantly drinking from the fire hose because it's just request after request and it needs to get done. This process has really helped streamline ways of working and helps us prioritize work. So, and it gets the teams who are requesting support to really think about what they're asking us to do, right? As opposed to just create an e-blast or do this. So in that briefing process, we ask them, we talk about prioritizing content, which I'll save that for just a minute. But we also ask them, what's the single most important thing, right? We're inundated with messages, and if employees are gonna take away one thing from this message, what do you want that one thing to be? Now, sometimes we go back and forth on what that one thing is, but ultimately it gives focus to the work, and I think it just helps drive efficiencies.
Cool. And we're definitely going to come back to the topic of content because it's probably one of the more interesting ones that you and I have had, and how content has really influenced the way in which you do your work. But before we get to there, I want to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about launching staff base at Aldi, because you're dealing with tens of thousands of people. There's different approaches to launching. We could just go live with everyone. Not necessarily the best idea. There's thinking about how do we, convince, well, first get the word out to these folks that are so hard to reach, and then how do we convince them to install, download a workplace application to their personal mobile device. That's hard. Yeah. So how did you approach that? at Aldi. How are you going about rolling out staff-based to your 40, 50,000 employees? I know you haven't gotten to the 50,000 yet, but what's been the process?
Yeah, I love that question because how we approached it and what we're doing now, they look different, right? Because we learned a lot with our initial pilot, and we've had to pivot and make changes. So we started with a group of store and warehouse employees, so about 1,500, about 2,000 people, and pushed out, communications, packs, QR codes, flyers, printed materials. Had to rely a lot on that manager cascade that I think that we've heard about that in earlier talks too, is just relying on that more traditional means of getting information down to frontline workers, if you will, through managers. So we also didn't think that registration and download would be a barrier. So here we're so excited, we're launching the app, we're ready to go, everybody's got their comm stuff, they've got their agenda talking points, this is gonna be awesome, and we just sat looking at the dashboard, right? And just one by one, people started registering. We're still waiting for that big spike, but we learned a lot, and we learned that registration and download was an unexpected barrier, that we had to kind of take a step back and think about, okay, how are we gonna solve this? So we did a couple quick things, a couple quick wins, and that was really pivoting our communications to focus the headline on being why this app is a benefit for employees. What functionality can they get out of the app? How is it going to make their working relationship with Aldi better? What benefit is it going to provide them? So we did that, and then also incentivized.
Free stuff.
Teams love free stuff, and so we've done a couple contests, and we get really good response from those.
How about like people dressing up in costumes? Do you do that?
No, we haven't done that. We'll save that one though. That's a good idea.
There have been some companies that we work with. I think there was one company with a bee. There was a bee that buzzed around. Anyway, so how did that work out? How has that worked out?
Yeah, so a couple things, and this will tie nicely into our discussion on content strategy. So one, we ended up expanding the pilot. So we realized okay, we've got some unexpected barriers here. Let's pivot. Let's see what happens. We are now piloting with 3 times that amount, so I think up to about 6,000 employees, and then realized that we really had to find what the hook was. What's the hook? What's the one thing that's going to get employees to say, yeah, I need to download this app, or even getting them to talk to their colleagues, right? Like they don't want to hear it from the internal comms team. They want to hear it from people who do the same job as them and say, you know what, Jeff, did you see the new app? It was so awesome. You should download it. And we hadn't gotten that yet. So we've really focused in a lot on what. I give you credit for this term because you're the one who this came out of our workshop last August. Is we focused in on our anchor content. And we get into that 3-pillar strategy approach of, how do we organize the app? How do we organize the content out of the app? And that 3-pillar approach of the anchor, so that's kind of the required information, or like, why do employees have to open this app every day? And then we get into the need to know information. And as you know, that's the topics that employees need to do their jobs, but they don't need to access that information every day. So employee handbooks or policies, procedures that are referenced, on occasion. And then there's the nice to know stuff, right? That's all the stuff that we want to share with employees that they may or may not care about. That's okay, but we can use the app and the analytics to understand what does resonate. And then ultimately would love to see that turn into an engagement piece that connects employees back to the company, and they feel really excited and proud to work for Aldi. So going back to what we did with the anchor content is that we've been working really closely to integrate other functionality, as you know, into the app. So using our workforce management system, our HR system, and again, providing that hook functionality so our employees can now see their schedules, they can see their team schedule, they can view PTO, they can view PTO schedules. I think that's it right now. And then we're also working on the next release of employees being able to request PTO through the app. So again, not taking away them being able to do that through traditional means, but offering the app is a more convenient way for them to perform those actions.
Yeah, and I think that's always a challenge when approaching a new solution, new platform, which is you come at it from the employee engagement, employee experience standpoint, which is great, and ultimately that's what we hope we can analyze and quantify the success of it. But it's like getting the people into the app to start. And I think what you learned and what we see frequently is that it's okay to integrate that very basic, practical tool that is important to the employee, and to take ourselves outside of the work that we do in internal communications and what's important to us, and to think about what's going to make the life of the employee better, what's going to make the life for them easier. They are coming to work for a purpose, and if we can give them something, give them a win, by way of easy access to something that's important, then that's going to get them in. And once you have them in, that's when the opportunity exists to surround them with all of the other great stuff, the nice to know content that furthers the mission, the vision, the values of the organization. So, that is something that we talk a lot about. And I think, as a practical takeaway, thinking about content in those three buckets, need to know, nice to know, and anchor is a great way to think about it, and then to prioritize that content, appropriately.
Yeah, and we had that second release of that functionality. It occurred like the second week of April, and again, we're watching the dashboard, right? And we saw that spike. So we're really starting to see a pickup in the downloads and registrations. So super excited with the direction we're headed right now.
Talk a little bit about how you deal with your colleagues in the various other business units, and when they're coming to you and saying, here, Libby, here, comms team at Aldi, put this on our application.
Yeah. We heard earlier, we heard somebody talk about saying no. Like, saying no is my favorite thing to do, and my team knows this. I think that was one of the biggest shifts when the 4 people at the time transitioned from HR over to my team. They were doing things and bringing me things, and I was asking, wait, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? Don't do that. We're not doing that. So I absolutely empower my team to question why. Absolutely question why. If something doesn't make sense to you, we should be questioning it. And say no. It's okay to say no. But now that we've got the strategy in place, ways of working in place, it's a lot easier to have those conversations. It's also pretty cool that we've been charged by our presidents and CEO to make them uncomfortable. I've had them say, make us uncomfortable. And if we tell you no, that means you're doing your job. So we kind of take that approach, I think, with our business partners. But things that have helped those conversations be more productive is sharing our strategy and our vision with the business team. So not only do we have that briefing process that I talked about, we this year have kicked off quarterly strategy planning meetings with our business partners. So the very first ones we had in Q1, it was really taking the time to introduce the teams to our strategy, and then have conversations with them and say, hey guys, what's on your roadmap? What are you working on that we need to be aware of that you're going to need our support over the next 6 to 12 months? Also some good learnings out of that. We learned that some of our business partners are really they're really well equipped to talk about their strategy, and you can tell that they've got a vision. And then you've got other teams that are just still really, really tactical. Then we learned that some teams' priorities conflict with other teams' priorities. So it's given us this really unique line of sight into, again, all the work that's being done across the business, and being able to better counsel and influence. We heard that word this morning too. So influence across the business. And we also use the 3-pillar approach, right? So I think we've talked about this. Everybody thinks their stuff is the most important stuff, right? Oh my gosh, you got to communicate this. It's the most important initiative. And one of my managers, who's not here today, she says it best: everything on the page cannot be bold, right? And I just love that. We say that all the time. And so by, again, introducing the business teams to the strategy and starting to talk about anchor, need to know, nice to know content, we make them prioritize their content. It helps us prioritize the content. So we can say to them, okay guys, got your request. We know what this initiative is. So tell us, is it anchor content? Is it need to know or nice to know? And they just look at us like, you know. But then we align on, you know, we work together to align on the type of content it is, and then we further have evolved the strategy, which I give my manager, Sarah, who is here today, credit for this one, that take it a step further, and what do we want employees to know? What do we want them to do? And how do we want them to feel? So that's the part of that briefing process that we take our business partners through. And again, it's a work in progress. It's not perfect. We're going to continue to iterate and evolve and ask for feedback. But I couldn't be happier with where we are as a team in just such a short amount of time, and the impact and influence that we're having across the business.
If you had to list out the top 5 categories of content that you're including in your application, this is kind of a curveball.
Yeah.
Just, you know, one of the questions that we always get is what content should we put in the application? So, you know, how have you thought about like what constitutes the need to know information?
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about the anchor content, right? So that's that functionality with scheduling, PTO, maybe swapping shifts, you know, in the future. But the need to know information would be like open enrollment, right? So it's a lot of your HR topics that, again, impact the employee. They might need to take action. Maybe it's some of our bigger DE&I initiatives that we want to make sure that employees are aware of and have an understanding of what we're trying to achieve in that space. And then the nice to know content, you know, we launched, again, one of my team members here, this was her baby, but we call it Divisions Doing Good. So at Aldi, we call our regional distribution centers divisions. And so Divisions Doing Good is just whether teams can submit their content with photos if they have them. Maybe they did a charity event, a packing event, or maybe they just did, you know, a field day, or just they were having fun. And we get so much of that content, and so that's really fun to post and then just see what the reaction is to that. We did also, you know, I think when we're seeing like humanitarian posts, so Aldi globally, we did donate $5 million to the Ukraine, and that was posted internally and just had a really good response from our employees on that topic.
Great.
So,
great.
Does that answer your question?
Totally.
Okay.
Thank you.
Because you didn't give me that question ahead of time.
Here's another curveball. No, just joking.
Okay. I'm ready.
So, 50,000 employees. We all kind of know that when content is meaningful or is personalized, if it's relevant to me, I'm going to consume that content. I'm going to look for that content. But not all content is necessarily relevant to me. So, how has Aldi thought about segmenting your population? When we do our strategies for success workshops, when we have discussions about the targeting of content to different employee classifications, which staff-based gives you that opportunity, there's so many directions that this can go. And large organizations, to synthesize that down to 10 user groups or 5 user groups or 100 user groups, I think we heard today, DHL has 1,600 user groups. What has your thinking been with regard to segmentation, and to the extent that you haven't really thought about it or haven't implemented it, where do you see it going?
Yeah, I definitely think that is a roadmap item for us over the next 6-9 months. So historically at Aldi, we've been a culture of pushing communication, right? Pushing an e-blast down, a memo. Yes, we still do memos. We still have attachments to emails. It's a conversation for another day. But it's been this mentality of we sent the email, so we communicated. Check the box, right? But there's never any follow-up of, one, you can't measure that. Two, what is, whatever you were sending the email about or the communication about, what was the adoption? Did you change the behavior? Did you get the result you wanted? So my point being is that we had no possibility of segmenting. So that's one of the things we love about the staff-based app. And I was having several conversations last night, and I found myself just like sharing all these awesome things about staff-based app, and with the disclaimer, like, I swear they're not paying me to say these things. Like, I really, really mean it. But that to me is going to be one of the most powerful things that we start working on. That in conjunction with the analytics. So, we talk about getting the right message to the right people at the right time, driven by data. I like to say informed by data, because I think you also have to pull in experience, right, and sentiment to inform the decision holistically. But as of right now, we've just got it segmented to our pilot groups, right? But we're going to work through what that plan looks like over the next several months, and again, we'll use the results of that to inform future segments. But I love what somebody said this morning too about, like, don't give away the power of your channel, like, hold on to your channel. So I think that there's also, that fine line of, okay, now we can communicate to these different groups, and all of a sudden everybody wants access to it. Like, oh wait, you can talk to my store, then I want to be able to talk to my store. So I think there's some governance and framework that we want to put in place just to make sure that we retain control.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I'm hearing from you is that this is a learning process. There's no silver bullets. It's not for companies that haven't yet launched that are here. It's not like you flick the switch and they all come. That it's a process, and you learn and you think and you accept the fact that maybe a strategy was not correct, and then you can adapt or change, pivot your approach. How did your team deal with? I mean, you're now in the second phase of your rollout. You started off the first time, wasn't that great. Now you're going out to a bigger tranche of people. How did your team feel? Talk about, because I know that when we first met, I think your team was 4 or 5 people. Now it's a year later.
17.
17, that's amazing. And I know not everyone here has that good fortune. Obviously, a lot of that has to do with the importance that leadership places on communications. But talk about how your team has weathered the storm, if you will, in terms of the ups and the downs of deploying a solution like staff-based.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question as well. I think that I'm kind of laughing because I'm thinking the opposite of what normally happened in this situation with this rollout. Typically, the business is ready to go, and we're waiting on IT, right? Because the IT's got a backlog, there's never enough resources. But in this instance, the technology was ready before the business was. And that was a big learning for us, right? So, and also a change management piece, like you said, for the teams. So the teams, they're like, the app works, the functionality works. Why are we not launching? Like, what's the holdup? Where are we going? Or why aren't we going? So really shifting the mindset and just understanding that it's not failure, right? Or not being afraid to fail. We talk about that a lot as a team, and that we learn from that and we pivot and we move on. So I think that when we kind of we just talk, we have those conversations. How are you guys feeling? This isn't failure. We're learning. This is good. And also understanding that because it's so important, we want to get it right. So that's why we're taking our time, or that's why we are pivoting our strategy or our approach, because it's really important, and we want to do a good job, and we want to make sure that it's beneficial and a benefit for employees, and not just another thing that they have to do. So as a leader, one thing that I reflected on, if I could go back to January and do that first pilot launch differently, I would have created clear milestones. We have those now. I think that when we launched the pilot, the first group, like, we didn't know what was going to happen. Like I said, we're watching the dashboard every day to see what might happen. But now in the second phase of the pilot, I've got 5 clear milestones. Some of them are technical. One of them is adoption, with download and registration rates, and hitting a target there. But I think then everybody knows, like, hey, here's the goals here's the boxes we need to check to move us to the next phase.
It's always a question that we're asked, which is, what sort of goals, what sort of milestones, what are the KPIs that we should be holding ourselves accountable to? Can you elaborate on what your KPIs were, other than maybe certain adoption rates, maybe?
Yeah, I think that, again, was basing it on, colleagues in the other countries, maybe success that they've seen with their apps, and realizing that, maybe 98% download and registration rate that's a great number, but diving a bit deeper to understand that, well, that's because how employees view their pay stubs, or that's how they order their uniforms, right? So there's always context behind that number. And I think that, we worked with your team to come up with what might be an industry average. So I think we looked at, it was 6 or 7 companies ranging in size from, I could recite this off the top of my head, from 6 to 50,000 people. And what we saw there is that download and registration rates after 10 weeks was only 40%. Mm-hmm. And that was really eye-opening for me. Helped provide an expectation and also helped go back to conversations with leadership and say, hey guys, we're not gonna hit 95% overnight. Here's some industry information that is our target, and we'll continue to monitor and adjust as we move along. And then I think, even after 12 months, you're up to 55%. And again, that's, an average. And then we saw the weekly average usage, that number I think levels off right around 72%. I'm really excited, I guess, looking at the data. There's a couple of things to pull out of our expanded pilot. One, we're absolutely hitting that 40% registration and download. And then 2, we're exceeding expectations for the weekly average usage. So to me, that is a support for the anchor content and that functionality and getting them in, right? Getting them in to use the app on a regular basis. So really supports, kind of checks the box for that hypothesis. And then we also look at our anchor, need to know, and nice to know content, and track that. And so we can see that employees are behaving the way that we thought they would. So they're accessing that anchor content the most, then it's need to know content, then it's the nice to know content. So it'll just be really exciting over time as we, work on segmenting. We built out our content plan to see how those numbers shift, and if we can get that nice to know number up a little bit higher.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, we've spoken a bit about analytics, you touched on it a bit, but there's so much power that exists from understanding how an employee engages with content. And the content that we're creating, is it being consumed or is it not? And looking at those metrics, looking at those analytics and saying to yourself, well, if they're not looking at it, why is that? And questioning, is it because of the location of the content within the application in the platform? Is it because of the length of the content? Is it because there's no visual aspect to it? And thinking about that, and to the extent that you reach the conclusion that it's just because no one really cares about the content, which is possible, and that's okay, well, then maybe that's a lesson, right? That
Absolutely.
Let's not waste our time. We have limited resources, limited time. Let's not waste our time creating that content. And that's a good learning to be had. So we're excited to continue to monitor, to keep an eye on how that performs for you and what we can learn and then share with the broader IC industry. I'm looking at the time. We have 10 minutes to go. I'm assuming that there's a lot of questions. I have a couple more, but why don't we open it up to some questions from the folks in the audience. And Cooper Shore.
Cooper.
Hey, Libby.
Hello.
So I think one of the interesting things about your strategy that we talked about during your evaluation of the platform and your evaluation of the tool in general was you've really taken kind of a let's try things out, let's adapt. Even with the pilot rollout, hey, we started with 2 and then we went to 6, and you're really iterating. What would you say to organizations that too often feel like they have to have that big bang, they have to have everything perfect, they have to have all the bells and whistles? Because we run into that. We run into organizations that feel like they have to have every single thing thought out before they launch, and even with the segmentation, that's something that's coming later. Why has your approach been a more iterative one as opposed to the big bang?
It's a great question. I would say that we are still challenged with that internally, right? So if I asked my team if they wanted to roll out today, they would say, yes, let's do it. Leadership's not quite there yet. So it's kind of like, we're meeting in the middle somewhere. They definitely understand the value of that iterative approach. And I think it's just, it's the desire and the understanding that we need to be able to reach our employees, and we cannot do that right now. I like to layer in the topic of turnover, right? We've talked about that and how it impacts so many of us in this room. That big bang approach, that's like thinking of the past, right? And every day is a new day or a chance to make a first impression with the way that our workforce is right now. So I think it's a shifting of a mindset. It's not always easy to bring them along. And I think it's finding, if they do say no, like where can you get those quick wins? I think that a lot of times when I'm having conversations with our senior leaders, and if I'm told no, right, I'm doing my job, but I'll ask them why and say like, okay, what part of this makes you uncomfortable? What part of this do I need to go back and take another look at? So I think it's just, again, having those conversations and continuing to push, if that answers your question. Yeah.
Greg.
Hey there. This has been amazingly helpful. I work for GE. We're getting ready to roll out staff base globally in the next 3 months, so taking a lot of notes. One thing that would be really helpful for us is we also have a large volume of frontline employees, if you will. What are like 3 very tactical things that you think worked really well in your pilot to get them to buy into the app?
Yeah, that's a great question. You can't underestimate the value of the in-person meeting right now, that just having, whether it's a daily huddle or stand-ups, that's where we've seen the biggest uptick, right? Where the manager, they're having a meeting, it's an agenda item. Okay, everybody pull out your phone and let's download the app. Contests, like I said, throw a contest in there and you'll start to see that uptick. Those are the 2 things that come off the top of my, or I think are have been the 2 biggest drivers of, tactical drivers of success for download and registration. Of course we're doing printed materials. I don't think, we're duplicating the messages as much as we can in different channels, but I think the top 2 are definitely in person, get on a meeting agenda, and give them free stuff.
Hey, so you and I have both spoken today about a strategy allowing you to say no to people when these requests come in. And as I mentioned earlier, one of my favorite things to do is talk to other comms people about what they're doing. So if it's not super top secret, would you be able to give us a bit of an insight as to what your comms strategy looks like right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, again, that mission statement doesn't change, right? It's the foundation of all the work that we do. We're on a mission to, inspire and engage through fast communication and getting it to the right people at the right time. So, that's just kind of our foundational statement. Then it layers into, 3, I keep saying pillars. I need to come up with a new word, but it's 3 more pillars. The big one is delivering the right message to the right people at the right time. It's about turning all the employees into advocates, all the advocates, both in and out of work, and then really connecting them back to the core purpose of our business. That's something that we really try to focus in on, again, just always coming back to those core values of who we are as a company. From there, then we ladder up into those 4 quadrants that I talked about, so the content and messaging, and then our channels and measurement. And then from there, we establish our objectives and goals, and key results for the year. So those quadrants stay the same, but the sub-bullets underneath change on a biannual basis. Yep.
Any other questions?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, hi, my name's Rich. I'm with Local Wisdom. So first of all, Libby, props to you with your backstory, working in the field and working your way up. I think that's one of the reasons why you guys are so successful with your comm strategy. So my question is, how has supply chain issues affected your strategy with your internal comms? And if you could elaborate on that, that'd be great.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for your nice comments. That's really nice. I appreciate that. Supply chain is tough. And I think it's one of those things that we, we experienced the disruption back in 2020 when you had the panic buying, so that was one wave of it. And then, of course, the ripple of the effect of that is still ongoing. Your question's really timely and relevant. We have a program at Aldi called Aldi Finds. For those of you you know. But that is our non-food food items that come in on a weekly basis. They're while supplies last. And honestly, that supply chain is a wreck right now. So we had this period of, we had 50 containers sitting on the ocean, couldn't get anything in the store. Now guess what? Everything's here and we don't have room for it. So you have not only your warehouse employees who are dealing with, we don't have space to put this we don't have space in our distribution center to store this stuff. Then it gets shipped to the stores, and if you've been in an Aldi store, you know that we're a very small footprint. There isn't extra room for extra stuff. So we have been just recently communicating just very transparently, especially with our store managers, and saying, guys, we know it's tough. We know it's hard. We're sorry it's not gonna get better anytime soon. But here's the things that we're doing as a company to try to make it better. Can we take, price reductions? We're trying to transfer product to stores where maybe it has a better sell-through rate. So I think to summarize, it would be just proactively communicating and being transparent. So not waiting until everybody's so frustrated that it bubbles up, but trying to go out with messaging to say, we hear you, we see you, we're doing what we can on our side to make it better. Please hang in there. Yeah. And Lottie, I'll go back real quick. You asked an example. I just told somebody no today. Okay, so we break room posters. So, that's a billboard channel, if you will. We had so many posters in all of our break rooms. I mean, there's a poster for everything. There's just covering the wall, and half of it's old, outdated. So we made the decision that no more posters in break rooms. So the only thing that can be up is anything that's legally required signage, or what we would say Aldi we would want there. So like our alert line, or like key procedures like that. And I had a colleague reach out and say, hey, we need a poster. I said, hey, no you don't, you can't have one. So I said, tell me what you need to accomplish and we'll get another channel to do that for you. But you can't put a poster in the break room.
Great, so we're just about time. I just want to say thank you for being a great client of StaffBase, for the commitment that your team, that Aldi has made to furthering the use of technology in the workplace, and just recognizing how a solution like StaffBase can really help you to be more effective and efficient and to really think clearly about what you do for a living. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Shout out to the StaffBase team. You guys are awesome, and I love working with you. I know my whole team does too.
Good. Well,